think we can hear you with the mask if you'd rather.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. But if you'd rather leave your mask on, I think we can hear you just fine through. It's up to you.
I might get short of breath.
Whatever you need.
I'll try.
Whatever you need. Okay. Go ahead and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is true and accurate?
I do.
Thank you. Are you the same Gene Kohles who has pre-filed testimony and exhibits in this matter?
That is correct.
Do you have any corrections to your testimony?
Well, I have kind of corrections that I might not have included that I wanted to, that I was not aware of at the time I filed testimony.
Additions or corrections?
Well, I feel that in order to make my testimony absolutely correct, that they need to be included. I'm new to this process. Help me. I don't have a lawyer.
You've been here 5 weeks. You've been doing just fine.
I guess I have to go through cross-examination and bring it up that way.
What are your corrections? We'll work through it. Let us know what you need to correct.
I didn't designate what certain items were on my exhibits that I submitted, which would include the properties and what they were and that type of thing, and the fact that the waterway was part of the
sounds like a perfect clarification.
Huh?
Sounds like a good clarification.
Okay.
Let's see it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and one of the exhibits that I supplied, I indicated, talked about waterways or people living there, and I want to clarify what they were.
Can you help us narrow it down? Can you help us narrow it down? We can pull it up.
Excuse me?
Can you help us narrow it down, and we'll pull it up? Give us a description.
I'm not quite sure which exhibit it is. Maybe one of the people here that can pull it up will show me. But it's basically the one of the parcels that show, it kind of extends out of the area, which shows my 2 parcels and the areas outside of it. So it's kind of a combination of both. I don't know if it's 5, 6, or 7, or whatever, what exhibit it is. No, that's the tile. But it does show the waterway too, that I'm referring to. Part of that there. And then there's another fork on it. Okay, yeah, that's upside down. Sideways. There's another. Well, I'll just start with this one. In the upper right-hand corner, those 2 buildings is owned by Mike Doden, and he has a hog confinement of 2,800 head. And then if you go to the section farther down, G Avenue to the south, keep going. I can't see it over the. Well, there should be another one, a little bit farther. No. There is a dairy farm operation within a half a mile of the pipeline to the south of the property. No, this is Sartasia. This is not. It's earlier. No. Okay, almost there. You're not seeing the dairy farm. It's cut off. Can you go farther down? There you go. Keep going. You're almost there. There you go. Okay. So in the lower, outside of my property to direct south, there is a homestead area of my tenant's homestead and his family live. And that the pipeline also continues through his drainage fields behind him, so he's even closer. If you showed up the whole map, you would see how much closer he is to the pipeline, which is one of my concerns. And across the road is his father, Mark Wilcox, who has 80 milking cows and 120 head of other stock. And then if you look in the upper, around the yellow, that whole area that goes from the left to the right and kind of forks, that is the West Fork of the Little Sioux River. And that is what the pipeline is going to cross. So I have great concern about the safety, because they're all within a half a mile.
But they're testifying yet. Hold on. Are those your corrections? Or your clarifications?
Yes, because I didn't have the exact names or number of head at the time I submitted the testimony.
Perfect. Thank you. So if asked the same questions here today, would you provide substantially the same answers as in your testimony?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay. Would you like to move admission of your pre-filed testimony and exhibits?
Yes.
Is there objection?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, the board will admit and give the weight due. I think you've been here for a few weeks. You know how we do this now.
Well, I know how we did it before. Since Tuesday, I'm somewhat confused because the board used to ask questions, and that's what my testimony was based on. But today it's doing it different, and I'm somewhat confused. So help me out. I'll try.
Oh, you mean when they come up here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So if they don't have an attorney or someone representing them, someone has to tender the witness, as the lawyers like to say. So that's why we're clarifying, do you have corrections? And then now we will turn you over. So in the previous, with the previous witness, they're represented by Ms. Ryan. So we bring them up and Ms. Ryan walks through the testimony. And so, but since you are representing yourself, the board does that. And now we turn you over to them for cross-examination on your pre-filed testimony.
I'm waiting.
So with that, we will allow the parties to ask questions.
Hi.
All right. Can we go back to that? Actually, can we pull up her KMZ, please, for Exhibit H parcel? All right, Ms. Kohles. Now, is this, as far as you're aware, the only, I shouldn't say the only, but your property that Summit seeks hazardous pipeline easement over?
Correct.
All right, and could we maybe zoom out a little bit, please, just a little bit more so we can see that dairy down south there? Okay. And so you're stating that homestead to the, it looks like quarter section south of you is less than half mile, or well, no, I guess that would only be a few hundred feet from the pipeline. Is that right?
Correct. That's one of my main concerns. All
right. And then there's another home off to the west of your property. Do you know who lives there?
If you're talking directly to the west, no. I know it's a home. It used to be the Doors. I don't know who it currently is.
Okay. And then within your quarter section there in the southeast portion, is that a homestead or a grove, or what is that?
That was a homestead. This is an old picture from 2015. All of those trees have been pretty much, other than the grove, cleared along the north side across. That area has been 100% cleared. and to this, except there, everything to the south of that has, since I've owned it in the last 2 years, that has been 100% cleared. It has 7 crumbling structures in it, buildings, cribs, crap, junk, old farm equipment, etc., that was completely cleared, and it has been reclaimed so that it could be utilized as tillable acres.
Okay, and
it also includes, it shows that there's a partial road there that has actually been planted over. So the south side of my farm is completely encased by land.
Okay, and so do you own that area right there with that grove we were talking about?
Yes, that's part of my 160 acres.
Okay, so you've got that whole quarter section?
Yes, yeah, the 4
got it.
quarter sections.
Okay, and did you intend for there ever to be a residence there, or that's going to be utilized in farming?
We utilized it as farming because of the city or county ordinances, because of the hog confinement and waste product. We could not grant, because of the terrible crumbling structures on the homestead. We were not grandfathered in because we're within a mile of the hog confinement. We were prevented from doing any kind of development there because we had hoped to clear it and to have a recreational area or a nice area to visit or to retire to. And because of the city ordinances, county ordinances, we couldn't do that. So we decided to change it into tillable acres because we were paying rent and taxes for that property that was unusable.
So is it your understanding that you're not able to build a new residential structure within a mile of the facility shown in the upper right-hand corner there?
Yes, which because of the section, my whole property is less than a mile from that confinement area. So yes.
All right. And you've personally been here in your part, and you've been preparing. How many hundreds of hours would you say you've invested in educating yourself in this process?
Oh, you have no idea. I mean, just counting since I received the notification in July 17th when it was actually mailed. I received it later. It was virtually 24/7 with maybe 2 hours sleep if I was lucky per night, doing crazy investigation, trying to figure out what was going on. I have, as you know, attended virtually all of the sessions since August 21st here faithfully. And I missed one day in the hearing because I'm so concerned about what's going on. And so I've gone to the expense. I do have a contract. My husband, we have a mechanical contracting business. I've had to completely do my work from Friday through Sundays since this thing started, cramming that into full-time work. And to be able to attend these hearings, drive up here, spend 3 or 4 nights in a hotel, and go to expensive gas, which I've not been reimbursed at all. And the hours of investigation and attending here and trying to educate myself and find out what's going on, hopefully to have my thoughts and my concerns aired, or have an input, is just, it's who I am. I mean, I fought cancer twice. I fought for my life twice. So the value of any life, I can't impress upon you how important, whether it's animal or any human being, they have the right to have a voice. They have a right to be safe. They have a right to live. I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. And I could not, my conscience, I could not live with myself. Well, you saw what it is up there. With myself, to put people I have known for years, and we're establishing the next generation of my farmers and my tenants and the relationships of the people I know, and to even have any concept that my inaction could lead to their death or being in a death zone, I just couldn't live with myself for that. I could not process that. I could not, it would break me.
Along those lines, has Summit provided you with any of their hazard distances or risks and plume analysis?
Absolutely not. And I have asked Mr. Rory and Summit Solutions people, I've tried to negotiate with them many times, initially related to the route. Can you change the route? Absolutely not. And I was here and I cross-examined Mr. Rory, and he confirmed that he gave me no options to change the route. So it was more toward the fence line on my land, which had already been surveyed. He said, absolutely not. When I asked about because I do not have experience as a mechanical contractor, every time my husband builds something, there are specifications and rules that you must abide by for safety standards. I asked Summit representative in May, and I can look at the names of that. Give me that information. My husband is an engineer. He is capable of determining or evaluating the information you send. We got nothing. Nothing. So then I'm trying to negotiate the tile lines that are being crossed, or how dangerous with the waterway that could be with the evidence of Zartatia, which really is what put me over the edge. Knowing that my land could be a weak spot in the pipeline, and that they were giving me no voice.
It's just slow down.
So Ms. Kohles.
This is emotional, I'm sorry.
You're all right. We just want to make sure we get this all on the record. So just slow down and take your time. We got plenty of time.
Emotionally realizing that my inaction and the possibility, the very real possibility that the rupture could occur on my land was inconceivable. I could not live with that guilt.
Your land, does it have any particular features that tend to suggest to you that it might be more risky than other types of soils or grounds, or are you referencing the Zartatia incident kind of generally?
Well, we have owned the land for 122 years. And in that time, we have experienced many different weather patterns. And that river has a tendency to flood periodically and wash out. I'm not technical, but it's a lighter gray dirt. It's more washable. I know that from 1989 until 2000, my tenant was involved in erosion control through the state or whatever that is. I'm not that familiar, but it expired, and he did do the planning, the contouring, the grass is grown, and that, the cover and that kind of thing, because it does go up to a higher elevation, and it was erodible. So you get heavy rains or a lot of rains, you do have erosion. You do have flooding in that waterway where it has to completely replant the crop.
If for some reason this project was approved and eminent domain rights were granted against your will, is there any location that is less bad on your property?
I have to be honest with you, after listening to this testimony, and I have reasons with what hazardous reasons and different things that have come out. For example, let me see just a minute. Bear with me here. When Aaron DeJoya, I pronounce that, who provides the technical soil reclamation for Summit Carbon Solutions, I asked him how much experience he had with CO2 pipelines. Initially, he said none. And then he came back and indicated there were CO2 pipelines in Montana and also in Wyoming. I asked him, was he aware of any incidents in Montana or Wyoming? And he said yes. Then the PHMSA representative, Brigham McCown, indicated where he had worked or was familiar. He was very on all kinds of pipelines, also a Summit testifier. And I asked him specific, because he did not mention Wyoming or Montana. And I asked him if he was aware of any incidents that might have happened, a minor leakage or whatever, in either Montana or Wyoming. And he said yes, but did not specify. Then you take the representative, or the man who was the overseer of emergency response for the Sartasia, Mississippi pipeline and that event, which we're all aware of. And he gave his testimony as to what happened. Well, what also came out during that after the February incident, in October, there was another incident where they were attempting to maintain, to service the line of the same line. And they did a planned valve opening to release the pressure so they could repair the line. And in the process of doing the repair on that line, the valve froze open. They could not close it. As a result, there was over 24 hours of release of this hazardous CO2 gas before they could shut it off. And over 17 miles of pipe was emptied. With that kind of evidence that I've now become aware of, I want no part of the CO2 hazardous critical pipeline. It's not safe. I don't believe that it's doing what they foster to be. There's no evidence, scientific evidence, that it's going to do what they claim. The risk to the farmers and the people of America for private enterprise and profit is abomination.
Ma'am, we were looking at about over 200 pages of attachments. Are those all the attachments that you reference in your written pre-filed testimony?
Yes, some of them I included them because I was told I had to have physical evidence, not hearsay. So I had to prove that I was aware of these various things. So yeah, I pretty much.
Okay, but were there any other exhibits that you uploaded to the Iowa Utility Board system after the fact that weren't included in those attachments?
Negative.
Okay, so everything that you wanted to submit has been submitted?
That I was aware of when I submitted it.
Okay.
On August 17th, yeah.
Based on your participation in these hearings and specifically listening to Summit's witnesses, has your opinion changed in any way about this project, whether it's publicly convenient or necessary?
One thing had become very clear to me is that Summit's stance on this pipeline, their policy has been, if you don't ask us, we don't tell. And if they ask, we don't have to answer. Another thing that has come out during these hearings and that I proposed to that was very concerning to me, Kohles Family Farms is a limited liability company. And I know what that means and where the buck stops and what happens to the people that mess up. When I became aware with Mr. Skovanek's public testimony that the pipeline is actually licensed as SCS Carbon Transport LLC. To me, that means that if anything happens on that pipeline, regardless of what Summit says relating insurance or going to make repairs or anything like that, is it truly Summit's responsibility? Or is it the responsibility of the Carbon Transport LLC? What kind of funding do they have? Where's the money coming from? We know that the 45Q is going to Summit Carbon Solutions LLC, and it's funding it. But then, so we know the money is there, but I also know in an LLC, it won't stay there. They have to write to remove tax-free any amount whenever they want to. It's not like a corporation or a partnership. It's a completely different operation. And the people in charge or owners or whatever of that have no legal responsibility. There's no recourse to come back on them personally. And in these hearings, where's, I don't know, an escrow account or what have you, in case something happens, there is an incident, who's going to pay? Also, there's another concern that during this deal, that the capture facility that they wish to build is listed under SCS Carbon Removal LLC. So here's another separation of power. If there's an incident on the pipeline, if there's an incident in the carbon removal policy, who's responsible? Where's the funding? I would have loved to have been here for the private session where some of this stuff came out before it went private, where they had to disclose how the funding goes and how they're going to break it up. But what this tells me, if they have many pieces of the puzzle broken up to almost where it's impossible to follow, to protect themselves. I have concern that these LLCs have been licensed or set up in the state of Delaware instead of Iowa. Now it's come to my attention that they're attempting to get the rights. Well, let me go back. In order to sequester this at the ethanol plants, they need huge quantities of water annually. It has been noted that Summit is supplying for permits to have 24 million or whatever annual consumption from the municipalities located in the areas where this process would happen to support being able to do this. They are also applying for permits or permissions under the city, SCS, and another LLC. Each one has its own application as an individual LLC. There again, if there's a problem in one area, the others are protected. Where's the money coming from? Because I was not able to participate, even though I was willing to do an NDA, but was not given that choice because I was not an attorney, to find out the agreements that Summit Carbon Solutions or whatever other entity, I don't know, maybe there's a whole other one I'm not aware of, what are they going to do? They're going to have more CO2 captured than is going to be shipped through the pipeline. What are they going to do with that leftover CO2? Mr. Powell, before he was shut down, indicated that that residue or that additional ones could be shipped by rail or by truck to areas for fracking purposes, for processing of fertilizer, for being shipped to California to use for aviation fuel development. And I'm trying to remember the other one, I don't know, might have been fertilizer. So we are paying public money for a private institution that they are getting tax-free. We, the people, are paying this in America. They get this money tax-free, and with the residuals they have left over, so they're going to ship it other places for additional personal profit.
Question for you, ma'am. You referenced the secret, the confidential proceedings. What's your understanding of why you, as a directly affected landowner and intervening party to this proceeding, were unable to participate in those confidential sessions with Summit?
My impression of what I had was I was not an attorney. An attorney knows client privilege. So I was not given that option.
And do you believe because you were unable to participate in those proceedings and unable to hear what Summit had to say behind the scenes, that that's put you at a disadvantage as a party in these proceedings?
Absolutely. It just indicates how secretive and sneaky they've been through the whole process. If you don't ask, don't tell. And if you do ask, they won't tell you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. I don't have anything further.
Ms. Brunhagen?
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Kohles. How are you today?
Hi.
My name is Chris Gruenhagen. I know you've been sitting in the room, so
it's nice to see your faces.
It's nice to see yours as well. I just have a few questions regarding your testimony, just to clarify some things. On the Exhibit H's, that I think you've included them as your, like, the first 17 pages of your attachment. Summit does not list a farm tenant on those, and I think you mentioned a couple times that you have a farm tenant on these properties. Is that correct?
There is not a farm tenant on my parcels, but they're within very close proximity, and we've had a relationship with them since 1982.
Okay. So you farm those two parcels then?
My tenant farms the two parcels. I live in Des Moines. My grandfather had a heart attack in 1955, and until that point in time, we did farm the land.
Okay. So you have a farm tenant that farms those parcels?
Correct.
Okay. Did someone ever ask who the farm tenant was for those parcels?
No.
Okay. Did the land agent visit you frequently? I think you testified to that.
Basically, I had my farm manager be the go-between. But then really late in the process, so they were in and out of the office, their office, interrupting them constantly, weekly, multiple agents, interfering with them being able to do their work. A lot of when they went into the office, beginning in 2023, midway, was, have they signed yet? Are they ready to sign? And that was the end of it. About that time, I started getting phone calls from an unidentified number multiple times a day who left no voicemail. According to Mr. Micah Rory's deal, apparently I was ignoring or not responding to their many, many attempts to contact me. Well, if they couldn't get me, why didn't they write me a letter and communicate that way? Why did they call from an unidentified phone, which I assumed was a robocall and not important?
Okay, thank you. On in a couple of pages of your testimony, I think page 2 and 6, you talk about, it seems like almost a couple of miles of drainage tile that you've installed on these properties.
Yes, it was completed in November of 2022.
And page 22 of the attachments that you have, is that show all of the tile that's on those farms?
It's all of the tile that I have GPS notifications on. There are other tile fields, but they're much older duration. And I know they're there because I remember going in a drainage ditch and putting my hands off to the side and putting dirt on it when I was 5 and 8 years old. And it was not located where these are. So there are more in the red and those other ones. Those are just the brand new ones, and it included 3477 feet of 8-inch tile, 3951 feet of 6-inch tile, and 1668 feet of 5-inch tile. And because of the erosion and different things, 1,423 feet of the ditch was leveled.
So first, do you know how deep the new tile is here?
It shows on standard, I would assume. I did not ask for that clarification. My farm manager would have it.
Just wondering, is your farm manager the same person as a farm tenant, or are they different?
My farm manager is someone I hired to manage the farm.
Okay.
And to oversee, the conservation and a lot of the natural business.
So they're a different person than your farm tenant?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. So when you talk about leveling the ditch, is that the green area that's going northeast to southwest, kind of on the southeast portion of the property?
This is the ditch here.
Mm-hmm.
And then also there's an area here that was ditch.
Okay. And so when you talk about the ditch being leveled, where was that at on the property?
My mother had been ill for a number of years and pretty much didn't do the necessary maintenance. I inherited the property in September of 2020. And so most of these land improvements have been made since there. Along the waterway, it really wasn't a waterway. It had been pretty much eroded and filled through the years, which meant there was a great overflow into the tillable land and acres and a lot of waste. I think there was, on each side of the waterway, there was about 30 feet of unusable land on both sides of that. So we wanted to trench it again so the flow would go to the road and would also go into the neighboring tile, where they were compatible, where they would be hooked into. And as you can see more up above where the red lines are, was connecting into the tile.
And those two red lines that you're identifying, are those going to intersect with the proposed pipeline route?
Yes.
And then also, I think on page 3 and 6, you express concerns about the construction cutting off a 30-year land during construction. Do you recall that?
Yes, correct. If you bring up that deal again, I can show you.
Go ahead and bring up the KMZ file. Or
yeah.
Is that a work
no,
for
that
you?
really doesn't show it.
Okay. Can you bring up the KMZ file for her?
Okay.
Thank you. So how do you access the land currently? Let's start there. There's a gravel road there on the east.
Yes, right. This is the only access to the farm right now, and it comes in somewhere around here or here. I'm not sure because I've been there when there's been crops in the ground. So it's really hard to decipher. Since when you saw that other plat, there's another picture where all of the trees have been removed. And you can see where, and let me indicate, right about here and here there's a bridge that has been out. So this road has not been in usage for a long time unless you go along here. Keep going. And then the access into the homestead was about here.
So is there a level B road running along the south side of your property?
That is complete crop ground.
Okay, so there is no road there.
Right. And since I've cleared this area, all of this area here, that has become tillable acres that goes clear out to here.
So do you access your property?
No, you cannot access it from there because it's all cropland. So if you look at the whole thing, there is no land access here, here, or here. It's all landlocked. The only way is to get it on this side. You have two waterways to go through, so probably right around here. And if they have to access for construction, which was my concern on the easement agreement, how are they going to be there? They're only talking about this area. This is completely blocked out. We can't cross under construction. We can't cross this area to the south, which is my tenant. We currently can do that. I was able to go by SUV here because he's a tenant and was able to go along this way. He had a little clearing. So I could get, and this area here is more alfalfa. So I was able to basically get here, somewhere along the waterway, and to here so I could take pictures of the land in August.
So you're indicating that the southwest triangle of your parcel would not be accessible?
This whole area will not be accessible. It will be not usable.
Would you like the board to require Summit to put in what's called a trench plug or a trench crossing so that your tenant could access that land on the other side?
I don't understand what that is.
An earthen bridge. We'll call it that for the moment. So that the construction area could be crossed with the farm equipment.
How can he cross the construction area if they built here? How can he cross it?
Would you like the board to require Summit to allow that crossing?
I don't want the board to accept anything, which could permit improvement if you want the truth.
Understood.
I mean, I can't.
Okay. We'll go ahead and move on. It's okay. On page 4, at the bottom of the page of your testimony, you talk about an underground waterway. Is that the green area, the grassed waterway there on the parcel?
Right. Because we've gone through a drought or a partial drought for the last 2.5 years, what typically could be standing water, if you go down underground, it is still stream fed. You know, there is still water lower in the ground. And Summit did not do a bore type of thing to see where that water, that natural water, that spring comes up. So there's always something there. On some of the lands, I mean, even when my grandfather raised cattle on there was a windmill there. And because of the underground springs, it naturally fed the water trough for the cattle. And he was raising Black Angus. And that mill is still there.
So the underground spring you're referencing, the proposed pipeline route would cross that in the bottom parcel?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then one more question. On page 308 of your exhibits, and I'll give the staff a moment to pull that up. They'll pull that up for you. In your direct testimony, you talk about the impacts of the Dakota Access construction, and you reference this exhibit. Is this one of your farm fields?
This is not one of my farm fields, but this is one of the farm fields my farm manager takes care of. And this is what compaction did from the Dakota Access pipeline. His land is virtually unusable, destroyed. And because of the compaction issues in the narrow area and the water seepage I always have related to the waterway, I'm very concerned that this could happen on my land.
So just to clarify, that is not your property?
That is not my property.
Okay. Do you know what county that property is located in?
I could look it up.
But you don't know off the top of your
I
head?
just know it's Dakota Access, and it's one of my farm managers, but all I'd have to do would be place a call to him, and I could get that information to you.
Okay. No problem. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
Oh, hi, Wally.
Thank you. You mentioned that your farm manager had contact with Summit's land agents. Is that correct?
Oh, my goodness, yes. His whole office was bombarded ceasingly for months and months and months and months.
Had you told Summit or its land agents to work through your farm manager?
Yes, because I had 3 surgeries in 2022. So I pretty much gave him the initial responsibility while I was recovering.
Okay. Did you give him any instructions as to what to tell the Summit land agents?
Well, initially we were trying to negotiate the easement agreement related to the brand new tile. And we did come to some agreement in the agreement of the size and how they would work around it. But they still did not answer my major concern of the risk and hazard for installation of the pipeline. They would not negotiate with me pricing because I did not agree with the value of my land and what they were paying me. I was aware of compaction, subsoil damage, and that kind of thing related to the construction attempt to reclaim the land. I was concerned about the weeds, or I just couldn't even access that. So I felt the financial situation was terribly lowballed. And as I continued and tried to get answers, then they started notifying me, and he complained that I did not respond or answer his questions. But my stand was, why didn't he answer my questions so we could move forward? The ball was in his court, and Micah Rory refused to do that.
So did you yourself personally have any contact with Summit land agents or any Summit representatives?
Yes, I finally received a phone call in May, and let me see, I have notes here of who that was. I have a lot of notes. I have the exact name. I have a file this thick. I do not have that with me, which had all the information as to who contacted me, what I requested him to send me, which was the information I've already indicated. And my June was completely full with family and guests and vacations planned. And I said, I cannot get back to you until the early part of July. I just physically can't do that. And the only thing I got was a new easement. He kept saying, oh, we're working out a deal. This will be different. The only thing that changed was the date. And it had I think it was a C, Exhibit C or something, which changed back to the 24 inch and everything that he had agreed to prior. The fact that he alluded to there would be, because of the what land values have become in the last couple of years and how mine had gone substantially up, that there would be a change. Nothing changed.
And was that a land agent who dealt with you directly or through your manager?
On a phone call. It was the first time I received a phone call with a voicemail message.
So why did the land agent talk to you personally that time rather than going through your farm manager?
I have no idea. He did finally go back to my farm manager on, I think it was July 6th or 7th. I think I stated in my testimony. And he said, no, she is not going to sign the easement. And then all the threats I had received pertaining to all the feedback, if you don't do this, we're going to get your land by eminent domain. You know, this is your last chance to negotiate with us. You need to do this voluntarily. I said no on the 7th. And on the 17th, they mailed my eminent domain notice. And I did not receive it, my second parcel, until after the deadline to pre-file testimony.
You were here during Mr. Rory's testimony. Based on your experience, what, or how did you feel after his testimony?
Objection, Your Honor.
State your objections.
It's not a cross-examination question. How did you feel?
Okay.
This is a time for cross-examination, not further direct.
Mr. Taylor?
There have been questions here by other counsel regarding the land agents and negotiations, and she's mentioned Mr. Rory. I was just asking for clarification regarding his testimony and her involvement in this proceeding.
So if you want to cross, did you have something else to add?
Me?
No. Thank you.
I do, though.
If you'd like to reference your testimony for your cross-examination on your question, you're welcome to.
Okay. You have testified here about your experience with the Summit land agents and representatives. Do you agree or disagree with what Mr. Rory said about that?
Oh, I disagree. And as I cross-examined him, I was under the impression he's giving, we work with the people, we'll change the route if it's within your land, we will negotiate. There is no alternate route. There was no flexibility. And when I questioned him specifically and asked him, I was told this, that no, this was the only route. It was the only safe route. There was no negotiation. And he confirmed that in his testimony, as it was shown from our court reporter. Yes, that's what I was told. I was given no choice. You either sign or we're going to take your property, eminent domain. He also indicated that his team, and he was in charge of, I forget, the right-of-way or whatever. I can look it up, but I don't want to waste the time because I think you all know it. That he trained the personnel, and that nobody initially, that he fired no one. They basically left for their own reasons because of family obligations. And he indicated they were trained not to behave in that manner. There's many cases where they did, and when I cross-examined him, he said, no, I was wrong. I heard his testimony wrong, that he did fire people for acting in that way. My main concern in his mind was that any landowner had zero rights in expressing their opinion because they are familiar with their land. And like I said, I have 122 years experience on my land with its different characteristics that I had. No, he had a deaf ear to any of my concerns. I had no voice on what was happening on my land, even though it was within the proposed corridor for the pipeline. There was no alternative route.
Mr. Jorde, I think it was, asked you about occupied structures near the pipeline. Where would the closest emergency management personnel be?
I'm not sure, but it is volunteer. And they can come from 15, 20 minutes away. I do know that the next area they would go would either be in the facility in Remsen, Iowa, I don't know, 25, 30 miles away, or Cherokee. Oh, that's another thing I was concerned about regarding the safety and emergency responders is in the testimony that came out on the person in charge of that, they didn't let first responders have the plume studies so they could train their personnel. They had intent that they were supposed to supply these to the different first responders, fire departments, or whatever for training. Intent, but they didn't. Who knows if they're going to do it? Who knows if they have to? How Summit Carbon Solutions versus the transport pipeline, who's responsible? I have questions on that. Also, the thing that was a red flag to me was the fact that he said no hospitals had been notified or contacted. They didn't even try to get a hold of them. What are our first responders supposed to do with the victims that they rescue? Is this basically you cordon off the area? Nobody goes in or out until the plume stops, and it's more of a recovery than a rescue mission? To me, that's kind of the conclusion I draw by their attitude.
You testified here this afternoon about the pipeline crossing the Little Sioux River, and then you said the river floods. Is that the same river you're talking about?
Yeah, it just depends on the season and how much rain.
Okay. And do you think that flooding would be a problem with this pipeline?
Definitely, with the rich black soil that's very movable, and because of the issues of how they've had to do contouring in the past, and I didn't go into, but there is higher elevations that are not tillable because they have various grasses on that. And then he also uses, for the last 8 years, has a no-till policy on his farmland to sequester land and also to prevent erosion.
So your tenant farmer uses no-till?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. There you are, Ms. Ryan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Kohles.
Good afternoon.
In your pre-filed testimony and in your testimony this afternoon, you've mentioned concerns about Summit being a limited liability company. So would it be fair to say that you think the board should consider Summit's business model when it decides whether or not to issue a permit?
Absolutely.
And during the past few weeks that you've been here, I'm going to guess you've heard the phrase public use a lot.
Yes.
Can you describe for me what your understanding of public use is?
Well, one of the reasons I'm totally against the pipeline is because it is not, and why we're even here having this hearing, I question it. Because my Just a moment. Basically, this is not being used. It is not for the public convenience. It is not or necessity, and it is not being used for the public benefit. It is merely being used as a vehicle of our tax money to create a for-profit situation for a private company. And I have another concern that if the board allows this, and if there's this prerequisite that any future company that wants to develop or take farmland will think they have the right to come in and steal our land for their own personal use and profitability.
Do you think a company that claims to provide something that's of public use should be allowed to keep key provisions of its business model confidential?
Absolutely not.
Do you think that a company that claims to provide a service that's a public use should be allowed to keep public health risks confidential?
Absolutely not.
Do you think that a company that claims it offers a service that's a public use should be allowed to keep other economic risks confidential?
Absolutely not.
Are you concerned that Summit is a new company that's never built a pipeline before?
You betcha.
Do you have any other concerns about the business model of Summit?
I think I've exhibited a lot of them. I have a lot of concerns I'd like to address to the board that I think should be viewed and examined further. I think this is completely jumping the cart before the horse. There is no permit. My husband was a Chicago Board of Trade. I'm very involved in the stock markets. I understand how things go, and I know what an equity investment is. I'm saying the wrong word. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. But anyway, when you bet and put your money into something that can happen, you're betting that it's going to be profitable. You take that risk. And I've heard time and time again how much money Summit has spent to go ahead with this pipeline. Well, you got to pull up your big boy pants, because when you bet on something and put your money into a speculative, not yet confirmed industry or financial investment, and it doesn't happen, you take the hit. That's part of the risk. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Kohles. That concludes my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Hike?
Just one question about your land. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, can I say it? Or can I read it? Some of my comments? I'd love to. Anyway, I think the IUB must do an environmental impact study on the critical hazardous CO2 pipeline. You need to evaluate this project in its entirety. It's a deadly public safety risk, which will massively deplete the public's water supply, which affects the livelihoods of all Iowans. It has long-term negative effects on the health, lands, and on the U.S. and world's food supply. Summit Carbon, being an Exhibit H landowner, we We are having our land condemned and taken via eminent domain for private profit only, not for public convenience or necessity, or to be used for the public benefit. We have to, as farmers and landowners, accept the hazards and risks to our lives, livestock, and the permanent damage to our land. We have to absorb the higher cost of corn to feed our livestock, and it cuts into our profit margins. We must endure the inconvenience of working around the construction area and not being able to plant or plan our future, what we wanted to do with our land. And we must endure the damage and repairs to our land and to our tile lines. I would like to wish, what if the farmers of America took back their power? After this year's harvest, and before the seed is ordered for next year, let's decrease our planting of corn and substitute it with other crops instead. Let's just plant enough corn to supply the food and needs of our country and to support our livestock industry. Nothing in excess. Leave no excess to feed the ethanol industry. Cut off their ability to make a profit on our risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kohles. Appreciate it. Okay, we will take a 15-minute break and then come back on the record